She had been sitting at that corner table for 2 hours and 40 minutes when the lights in the restaurant went out. Not all of them. Just the ones near the entrance, the warm amber sconces that lined the oak-panelled walls of Thornbury's, one of Vancouver's oldest and most quietly prestigious dining rooms, the kind of place where the menus had no prices, and the sommelier remembered your birthday without being told. The kind of place where a woman sitting alone at a table for two became, after a certain point, invisible in the worst possible way. Gemma Osei had made the reservation herself. That was the part that stung the sharpest. She had called 3 weeks ago, on a Tuesday morning, when she was still feeling brave, and asked for the corner booth by the window that overlooked Burrard Inlet. The hostess had asked for a name. Gemma had given it. She had not, at that time, anticipated spending the evening becoming very well acquainted with the breadcrumbs she hadn't eaten. She was 31 years old. She worked as a forensic bookkeeper for a mid-sized financial compliance firm on West Georgia Street, which meant she spent her days finding the lies people hid inside numbers. She was good at it. She was, in fact, exceptionally good at it. The kind of good that made her colleagues slightly uncomfortable. The kind that made her boss forget to give her credit when he presented her findings to clients. She was used to being underestimated. She had at some point in her late 20s stopped being surprised by it. Tonight was supposed to be different. His name was Fletcher Dade. They had matched on Hinge 6 weeks ago. He was 40, divorced, a commercial real estate developer with a profile photo that suggested a man who jogged and read serious books and owned at least one decent blazer. He had texted her every morning for a month. Not overwhelming texts, considered ones. He asked follow-up questions. He remembered details. He had said, once, that he found women who knew their own minds to be the most attractive thing in the world. He had told her to dress beautifully. He had made the reservation under her name, insisting she arrive first so she wouldn't have to wait at the door. She had arrived at 7:05. It was now 9:51. Her phone showed 3 texts from her sister asking how it was going. Nothing from Fletcher. Gemma looked down at herself. She had worn the burgundy dress, the one she had driven to Metrotown specifically to find, the one that the saleswoman, a kind, matter-of-fact woman named Denise, had zipped up and said, without flattery, "That's the one." It fit the generous curve of her hips and the full softness of her shoulders without apologizing for any of it. It had cost more than a car payment. Gemma had eaten a salad for lunch, so she wouldn't feel too full to enjoy dinner. She had not eaten dinner. The water in her glass had been refilled 4 times by a server named Anthony, who had the careful, compassionate eyes of someone watching a slow-motion collision. He had stopped asking if she wanted to order. They had reached an understanding. Gemma picked up her phone. She opened Fletcher's contact. She looked at his last message, sent at 4:30 that afternoon. "On my way to a meeting. Can't wait for tonight." She blocked the number. Then she opened her banking app, looked at her balance, looked at the cost of the sparkling water and the bread she hadn't touched, and decided she had 3 minutes left of dignity, and then she was leaving. She was reaching for her coat when the front doors of Thornbury's opened in a way they had never opened before. It wasn't loud. That was what made it wrong. 4 men in charcoal suits entered without hesitation, without waiting to be greeted, without looking at the hostess stand. They moved through the dining room, the way water moves through a space, finding every corner without rushing. The hostess, a composed woman who had been unfazed by everything Gemma had watched her handle that evening, took one look at these men and stepped back behind the lectern, as though she hoped the wood might swallow her. The room did not panic. The room went quiet in the specific held-breath way of people who understand, instinctively, that making a sound is not in their best interest. The man who followed the 4 was not tall in the theatrical way. He was simply large in a way that rearranged how a room felt. Broad through the shoulders, unhurried in his stride, with the kind of face that had been assembled for intimidation. A strong jaw, dark hair gone slightly silver at the temples, and eyes the color of a winter lake. Cold, still, patient in a way that had nothing to do with kindness. Gemma knew who he was. She worked in financial compliance. She had spent 3 years tracking shell companies, offshore accounts, and suspicious patterns of movement through Vancouver's real estate sector. She had, on 2 separate occasions, flagged a network of numbered corporations to the RCMP that led, eventually, to investigations she was never publicly credited with. She knew the names at the center of those webs. Ronan Ashby. He controlled the Ashby organization. A sprawling, carefully layered empire built on contract logistics, underground gambling, and the quiet domination of a significant portion of the Pacific Northwest's port infrastructure. He was investigated regularly and charged never. He had a building named after his family on the UBC campus. He gave money to children's hospitals, and he made people disappear, and both of these things were true simultaneously, and everyone who knew the city well enough understood this. He was, in person, worse than his reputation. One of his men, a broad, scar-faced figure who moved at his right shoulder, stepped forward and addressed the room without raising his voice. "Thornbury's is closed for the evening. Please leave through the kitchen. Leave your belongings. You will not be harmed." The dining room emptied in under 90 seconds. Gemma had never seen 60 affluent Vancouverites move so efficiently. Chairs scraped. A woman left her mink stole. Nobody complained. Nobody made eye contact with the men at the door. Gemma's legs did not cooperate. She sat, frozen, in the corner booth by the window, her coat half pulled from the chair, watching the room drain around her. She told herself to stand. Her body replied with a calm, clinical refusal. Ronan Ashby's gaze swept the room once, then it stopped. He crossed the restaurant without hurry, past the abandoned plates, past Anthony the server, who was pressed against the far wall with the quiet desperation of a man making peace with his choices. He came to a stop at Gemma's table and looked down at her. His eyes tracked the empty wine glass, the untouched bread, the coat half dragged from the chair, and the phone face down on the white linen. He did not ask permission. He pulled out the chair across from her, Fletcher's chair, the chair that had been empty all evening, and sat down. "You're the auditor," he said. His voice was low, unhurried, the voice of a man who had never once needed to repeat himself. Gemma stared at him. Her brain performed a very fast, very unhelpful series of calculations. "I'm sorry," she said. "What?" He looked at her with an expression that was not unkind, but was absolutely certain. "Fletcher Dade told my associate he was meeting his auditor here tonight. He said she had documentation. Physical files." He paused. "You don't look like an auditor." Gemma blinked. "I am, actually," she said. "I'm a forensic bookkeeper." She stopped. "That's not the point," Fletcher said. "Fletcher told you." She stopped again. The pieces were moving, and she didn't like the picture they were forming. "What kind of documentation?" Ronan leaned back slightly, studying her. 2 years ago, Fletcher Dade began managing the property portfolio of several of my holding companies. Last week, I discovered a pattern of inflated valuations and redirected maintenance fees amounting to approximately $3.8 million. Yesterday, my associate confronted him. He said he'd compiled everything into a paper trail. He said he was meeting his contact tonight to hand it over before he ran. The silence stretched. Gemma felt the salad she'd had for lunch turn to concrete in her stomach. "He wasn't meeting a contact," she said, and her voice came out very flat and very steady, which surprised her. "He told me Thornbury's was his favorite restaurant. He spent 6 weeks texting me good morning. He said he loved women who were direct." She looked at the empty chair. She looked at Ronan Ashby. "He used me as a decoy." Something moved in Ronan's expression, a fractional shift, impossible to name. "He knew you'd be visible," Gemma continued, because the rage was rising now, clean and organizing, pushing the fear to the edges. A woman sitting alone for 3 hours at a table for 2 in a place like this. Very noticeable. Your people would come here, find her, waste time figuring out she's nobody. She caught herself. That she's unconnected, and Fletcher would be on a plane. She reached for her water glass. Her hand was shaking slightly. She drank from it anyway. I skipped lunch, she said, to no one in particular. I bought a dress. I've been sitting here for almost 3 hours being quietly pitied by my server, and he was using me as a distraction for organized crime. Across the table, Ronan Ashby was very still. The scar-faced man at his shoulder cleared his throat. Boss, she's a civilian. Clean record. We should move on. Ronan did not look at him. He was looking at Gemma. How long have you been in financial compliance? He asked. She looked at him like the question was strange, because it was. 8 years. Do you know what inflated property valuations look like on paper? That's literally what I do for a living. He nodded once, as if she had confirmed something. Fletcher Dade redirected $3.8 million. He's been gone since this afternoon. My people can find him, but I need to know where the money went before he moves it again. Shell accounts, offshore routing, secondary LLCs. It moves fast. Gemma stared at him. You're asking me to help you. I'm telling you the situation. That's the same thing. A very small thing happened at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. You're right, he said. It is. Gemma set her water glass down. She looked out the window at the lights reflecting off the inlet, at the city she had lived in for 31 years, at the night that had turned into something entirely unrecognizable. She thought about Fletcher, about 6 weeks of careful, considered texts, about the way he'd said, I love a woman who pays attention, and how she had believed him, because she was the kind of woman who wanted to believe that the attention she paid to the world would eventually be paid back. She had not gotten dinner. She had gotten this. I would need access to the corporate registry filings, she said. If he redirected maintenance fees, there's a paper trail through the municipal property tax records. You can't fully obscure it. You just move it far enough that most people stop looking. Most people, Ronan said. I don't stop looking. He looked at her for a long moment. The restaurant was very quiet. Somewhere in the kitchen, a pot was cooling on a stove. Come with me, he said. I'm not going anywhere with you, Gemma said, and meant it. Dade's associates will know you were here. When they can't reach him and my name surfaces in connection with this restaurant tonight, they'll start pulling threads. Yours is one of them. I can go to the police. You can, Ronan said. There was nothing threatening in his voice, only a very precise neutrality. Vancouver PD's Financial Crimes Unit has 4 officers currently assigned to active investigations. 2 of them are reviewing files that passed through my lawyers on their way to being quietly shelved. I'm not telling you this to frighten you. I'm telling you so you can make an informed decision. Gemma thought about the 2 RCMP investigations she had flagged. The ones that had gone further than anyone expected. The ones that had, quietly, stopped going anywhere at all. She thought about the dress she was wearing, the lunch she hadn't eaten. She thought about the fact that she was very good at finding the lies inside numbers, and that somewhere in Vancouver tonight, Fletcher Dade was counting on her being too afraid to use that skill. I want dinner, she said. Ronan blinked. It was, she noted with distant satisfaction, the first time he had looked anything other than completely composed. It's almost 10 o'clock, Gemma said. I haven't eaten since breakfast. If I'm going anywhere with you, I need to eat something first. She looked at the kitchen doors. Your people cleared out the staff, but there's food back there. Someone can make something. I'm not asking for a tasting menu. I'll take soup. The scar-faced man stared at her. Ronan Ashby looked at her for 2 full seconds. Then he turned to the man at his shoulder. Tell Yuri to find the kitchen staff and bring them back in. Ask them to prepare something. He paused. Please. The man blinked and went. They sat across from each other in the empty dining room, while, Distantly, the sounds of a kitchen being restarted filtered through the swing doors. Gemma ate a bowl of butternut squash soup and half a bread roll and felt incrementally like a person again. Ronan Ashby did not eat. He watched her, in the way he seemed to do everything, with a focused, unhurried attention that she suspected most people found threatening. She found it clarifying. "Why were you actually waiting 3 hours?" he asked after a while. She looked up. "Because I thought I'd misread the time. Then, because I was embarrassed to leave. Then because," she stopped, "because he'd been kind. And I'd spent 6 weeks deciding that was real. And it's hard to walk away from that, even when you should." She met his eyes directly, the way she did when she was reading a ledger, and wanted the numbers to know she wasn't afraid of them. "Women who look like me don't get a lot of 6-week kindnesses. Sometimes we hold on to them longer than we should." The restaurant was very quiet. "He knew that," Ronan said. "Yes," Gemma said. "He did." Something settled in his expression. Not pity. She wouldn't have stayed at the table for pity. It was something older and more serious than that. They drove to Ronan's offices in a reinforced black SUV through the rain-slicked streets of downtown Vancouver. Not a penthouse, an actual office, on the 14th floor of a nondescript building in Yaletown, with a boardroom that smelled of leather and expensive coffee and the particular tension of a place where serious decisions were made quickly. His team had pulled what they could on Fletcher. The man had emptied 2 personal accounts late that afternoon. His condo in Cole Harbour had been vacated. Food still in the fridge, closet half empty. He'd bought 1 ticket, Montreal, connecting to Lisbon. He left his cat, one of Ronan's people noted, looking up from a screen. "The cat's fine," Gemma said. She had her laptop open. She had, as it turned out, not gone to dinner entirely unprepared. She had brought her work bag out of anxious habit, and her work bag contained the things she always carried. "The documentation he promised you doesn't exist as a single file. You can't compress $3.8 million of redirected maintenance fees into anything you can hand over at a restaurant." She typed rapidly. "What you can do is string it through a series of LLCs that look like they're registered to different people, but share a registered agent. Here," she turned her laptop to face him. On the screen was a chart she had assembled in 40 minutes, a clean, branching map of 4 numbered companies, 3 shell addresses, and a trust account registered to a numbered company in the Cayman Islands, all ultimately traceable to a single signatory whose name appeared. In one document she had cross-referenced through BC Registry as Fletcher William Dade. Ronan leaned forward. He looked at the screen for a long time. "The money is still moving," Gemma said. "He set up a transfer sequence before he left. It'll complete in," she checked the timestamps, "about 6 hours. If you have anyone with authority over the receiving account, you can freeze it. If you don't, it's gone." Ronan was already on his phone. She watched him give orders in 2 languages, efficiently and without drama. She watched his people move. She observed, as she always observed, the way a room rearranged itself around a person when that person had real authority. Not the performed kind, not the aggressive kind, but the quiet, settled kind that came from being exactly who you said you were. It was, she thought, the opposite of Fletcher. At 1:17 in the morning, Gemma's phone rang. She looked at the screen. Restricted number. She looked at Ronan. He nodded, once. She answered and put it on speaker. "Gemma!" Fletcher's voice was tight, too controlled. Airport noise in the background. "Listen, I'm so sorry about tonight. Something came up, a real emergency. Are you okay?" Gemma looked at the boardroom table, at the chart on her screen, at the 6 Ronan's people who had gone very still. "I'm fine," she said. "I'm home." "Good," he exhaled. "Listen, I need a favor. It's urgent. You know how I had some documents, financial files. I mentioned to some business associates, I need you to pull some registry records for me first thing tomorrow. Property files. I'll send you the company names." "It's time sensitive." "What company names?" she said. He listed 4 of them. They were, she noted, 3 of the 4 on her chart. "Sure," she said. "I can do that. Where should I send them?" He gave her an email address. She wrote it down. She looked at Ronan's tech person who was already typing. "You're a lifesaver," Fletcher said, and the warmth in his voice was so practiced it was almost impressive. "I'll make it up to you. The restaurant thing, I feel terrible. I'll book somewhere even better." "That's okay," Gemma said. "You don't have to." She ended the call. The room was quiet for 3 seconds. The email routes to a secondary account linked to his Lisbon contact, Ronan's tech person said. "We have a name. The transfer free's cleared," said another. "Money's locked." Ronan looked at Gemma. She looked back at him, sitting in a boardroom at 1:17 in the morning in a burgundy dress with a bow in her hair that had gone slightly sideways over the course of the evening. "He gave you the shell company names himself," Ronan said. "He didn't think I'd know what to do with them," Gemma said. "He thought I was a resource, not a problem." Something happened in Ronan Ashby's eyes. A shift. Small, significant. The same shift she'd noticed at the restaurant when she'd said, "I don't stop looking," as though he were revising a calculation. "What do you want?" he said. "For this," she was quiet for a moment. "I want to know he doesn't come back. He won't. And I want to not be a liability. Whatever you think I know about tonight, I've signed NDAs more airtight than anything you could offer me, and I've kept them. I'm not a threat to your operation. I'm a bookkeeper who had a bad date and a long night. You're more than that," Ronan said. "I know," she said simply, "but I'm letting you figure that out at your own pace." He was quiet. Outside the boardroom windows, Vancouver glittered in the rain, the lights of the port stretching along the inlet like a second city laid over the first. "There's a car waiting," Ronan said. "It will take you home." She nodded, closing her laptop. She stood, gathering her bag and her coat. "Gemma." She turned. Ronan Ashby stood at the end of the boardroom table, his jacket removed. Now, his sleeves rolled to the forearm, looking less like a ghost story and more like a man who had been awake for too many hours, keeping too many things together. He looked at her with the full, unguarded attention of someone who had, somewhere in the last several hours, stopped calculating and started seeing. "The dress," he said. "It was worth wearing." She looked at him for a moment. Then she said, "I know." She walked out into the corridor, heels quiet on the marble floor. In the elevator, she exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. Fletcher Dade was arrested at Lisbon's Humberto Delgado Airport. 14 hours later, based on documentation filed through channels that were never explained to Gemma and that she did not ask about. She read the news item on her phone while eating breakfast, actually eating it, sitting at her own kitchen table in the morning light with proper coffee and toast. The 3.8 million was recovered. This was also not explained to her. 3 days later, a flat white appeared on her desk at the office with a card that said nothing except Thursday. Thornbury's. 7. The handwriting was controlled, unhurried. The card was heavy stock. There were no prices on the menu at Thornbury's, but she knew what that kind of card cost. She turned it over in her hands. She thought about a man who had seen her, clearly and without flattery, across a restaurant table, at the worst moment of a very long evening. She thought about how he had asked the kitchen staff to come back and make her soup. She thought about how he had said, "You're more than that," and meant it as a statement of fact rather than a compliment. She was a woman who spent her days finding the truth inside numbers. She was good at knowing when something added up. She turned the card right side up. She typed a single text to her sister, "I have plans Thursday." Her sister sent back 3 question marks and a champagne glass emoji. Gemma put the card in the inside pocket of her work bag, where she kept the things she intended to keep. At 7 on Thursday evening, she walked through the front doors of Thornbury's in a different dress. Deep sapphire this time, found on her lunch break, bought without deliberation. And Ronan Ashby was already there, standing at the corner booth by the window, waiting. He had arrived first.